Welcome, everyone, to Mythstorie, a podcast about myths and history. I am one of your hosts, Bryant, with my permanent guest, Cammy. Hey, Cammy.
Hey, Bryant. How are you?
I'm excellent. How's it going for you?
Fantastic. I feel like we're switched. Like, aren't we normally like you're on one side and I'm on the other? And
Yeah.
now we're
If
like
you're on the
opposite
video,
sides.
there we go. I fixed it. Yeah, there we go.
Oh
That's the
no!
one. There we go.
I liked it better.
Remember, Mysteries on YouTube. We get some nice views there, some love there, but also on almost all podcast services through Pinecast. But take a look at our beautiful faces. I'm like completely shaved, and my head's shaved, and all my hair's on my back, but you can't see that. So, Cammy, we're talking about Bigfoot,
Same.
right? Because that's the no, that's not. We did that.
Bigfoot.
Yeah,
I'm like, I'm not ready.
hairy backs.
Yeah.
No, Mystery talks about lots of random topics. We just recently talked about Khonshu, which I think was kind of a classic mystery thing. This is an Egyptian god. Before that, we talked about Rasputin. So there were it's a little more on that line. He's a mythical figurine. We're talking about another person who is very real, but almost mythical in what they've done in life. And that's P.T. Barnum, which is a really good topic because this is kind of insane. So you might have seen a huge Jackman in the Greatest Showman film that was shoved down all of our throats a couple years ago. I heard it was good. I didn't see it. Did you see it?
Seen, of course.
Yeah.
I did want to watch it for this because I wasn't sure how I was gonna what angle I was gonna use for the story, and then I did not do that.
Well, pause the podcast if you're like dying to see that and go watch it because this might affect the movie.
And then
it's pretty wild.
Tell us about it in the comments.
Yes. Yeah. No, if you did see the movie, please, if you knew about Barnum before, I think that's a big deal because he's just wild. He's a wild character, and the movie definitely took some liberties there. So as the show goes, Cammy's going to regale us with his story, and then we'll have that discussion afterwards that I'll lead. So Cammy, regale away.
Okay, absolutely. So I used hoaxes.org, the Fiji Mermaid, and barnummuseum.org, and it's basically P.T. Barnum's museum's webpage. In the beginning, God created man, but did he stop there? This is what P.T. Barnum pondered as he waited to view the small parcel handled by one Dr. J. Griffin from the British Lyceum of Natural History. Surely the strange man who, by accent, one would question if he's even British, would have with him an even stranger prize. Barnum paced the room ever so lightly, picking up objects and putting them down, feigning interest in a copy of the daily paper. As the door to Griffin's office swung open, Barnum tossed the paper to the side and loudly said, "Hello." The doctor greeted him with less enthusiasm and walked him back to his rented office space. "I know why you're here. Please have a seat." Barnum sat, the aura about him taking up more space than the man himself. A jovial smile danced about his lips. He had seen the creature before, but for the sake of the show, would others be fooled? This he must know. So wide-eyed and waiting, Barnum sat while the doctor shuffled about his desk. "I just need to find the key. It was here a second ago." "Around your neck." "Excuse me?" "The key, it's around your neck." "Oh, much obliged, Mr. Barnum." The doctor ripped the string from his neck and walked to his curio cabinet, which contained what appeared to be different specimens Barnum had only vague knowledge of. A stuffed, small, mammal-like creature with the bill of a duck caught his eye, but he said nothing. The door fumbled with the chest at the bottom of the cabinet. The doctor fumbled with the chest at the bottom of the cabinet. He pulled out a small package wrapped in purple cloth, and there it was, in all its glory, the ugliest creature Barnum had ever seen. The head was shriveled, and the arms were frail and appeared to be defending the creature as though it had met a terrible end. The scales began about mid-body and tapered to a fishtail and fins. Surely they would be more like the ancient stories, beautiful and young, bathing on rocks. "It's really ugly," the doctor looked up at Barnum. "No, don't get me wrong. It's perfect. It's too ugly for people to question the authenticity. It's actually really perfect. Do you think this will work?" The papers seemed interested at first, but they've not printed a word about mermaids in weeks, the doctor said. "Leave that to me, Levi. I'm planting seeds, and soon they will grow into money trees for us both." Barnum left the office and headed straight to the nearest paper. He brought with him gloriously intricate wood carvings of mermaids. beautiful women topless with the tails of fish sunbathing on the rocks off the sea line. He lamented to the papers on the woes of not being able to procure the mermaid for his American museum and told them they could print the wood carvings since he had no use for them. Every paper in New York printed the woodcuts the next day, along with stories of the specimen. That same day the papers were distributed. Barnum let the press know that he had struck a deal with the doctor and he was going to have exclusive rights for displaying the creature. You see, this was Barnum's trick all along. He bought the mermaid from a showman and hired Levi Lyman to parade as a doctor of natural sciences with a stunning find. Even the British Lyceum was a figment of Barnum's mind, and the public fell for it again, as they had so many times before. The lines of the exhibit tripled the museum's daily revenue, and the deceit of an entire nation persisted. As Barnum said, many people are gullible, and we can expect this to continue.
Yeah, that was like his life in a nutshell. Many people are gullible. And that the Fiji Mermaid, that's a really good. I'd never heard of this before. That's a really good way to start. That's almost like a mini podcast of itself. And I'll explain in a nutshell. That is essentially like it's a fake thing made to look like like a grotesque mermaid. So it's tiny, has like a finnish tail kind of thing, almost more like more fishy looking, with a human-esque head, usually humanoid kind of arms. There's a notable one that was made of paper mache that was found, and like in the 1800s. There was a captain who bought one from some Japanese sailors for like 6,000. There was another account of American whaler buying one in Indonesia. So like, it obviously they looked real enough, but they were like
It's
paper
like a
mache.
taxidermy specialist.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Like, and sometimes they were just straight up made out of wood. But yes, yeah, it was a taxidermied crazy thing, which I'm sure happens more than we like think about. But yeah, so Barnum, incredibly intelligent, no matter what, a very smart person, no matter what you do feel about him. And The Greatest Showman was a title that I think he gave himself. Most of the ones he did. In fact, there was this thing called the Barnum effect, which is also called the Four effect or the Barnum Four, which is a psychological phenomenon. This is straight from Wikipedia, where you give high accuracy ratings, where you're saying like, oh, I foresee you're going to be thirsty later, and it's like, oh, I am, I will be. So he was really good at that kind of thing, and he was just good at like knowing. And he was very empathetic, I suppose. But
Have you seen the movie The Mentalist?
no, but I'm very familiar with it. Yeah.
With the movie?
Mm-hmm.
There's like 2 versions apparently. Candace and I saw the newer one, but there's like
Okay.
an older one.
I might be
But
thinking of the
that's
older
what it
one.
reminds me of, this guy who's just really good at picking up clues.
Yeah, yeah, and that require. I mean, whether it's usually hokey, but it's you have to be kind of a smart person, high emotional intelligence, for that sort of thing. And Barnum was, and he was also very entrepreneurial. From an early age, he had to be. His he was like the primary caretaker for his family, big family. And from an early age, I mean, he didn't want to like work. I mean, he wanted to like create his own business, and he wanted to make it big. I mean, he had several businesses, general store, book auctioning, real estate speculation, statewide lottery network. He had a weekly newspaper in 1829. Mind you, he was born in 1810. So when he was 19, he had a newspaper already, and was doing editorials that had libel suits. I mean, he was a very bold and brash guy. And yeah, so he was born in 1810. He lived until 1891. He was 80 years old when he passed away. And he was born and died in Connecticut, and that's where he served later in office in 1866, where his effects, his imprint still left today in politics, as well as what he did for like the circus and stuff like that. But yeah, so before the full PT Barnum and Bailey stuff, because that happened quite late, he did have tons of like he was the owner of the Manhattan-based American Museum, and he was I'm trying to think of like the word for it. He didn't necessarily have a carnival, but he was like a showman, in that he would people with what we might call disfigurations, special conditions. Lots of people who there was a man who who had stopped aging very prematurely. So he was an adult, and Charles Sherwood Stratton, also called, his stage name was General Tom Thumb. He got great fame in the circus under Barnum, and he had these conditions and afflictions, and Barnum would gather up people like that and show them off. I mean, it's sort of bearded lady stuff. That was what he did, and he would charge you 50 cents for you to walk in and take a look, and people ate it up. But he man, it's wild. So one big thing he did was, there was like a woman who I believe she was a former slave. He declared that she was like a caretaker to George Washington, so she would have been like 160 years old. Joyce Heth, that's who it is. Joyce Heth, according to
Yeah, there was
Britannica.
some discussion on whether Barnum actually bought her, whether she was like a slave to him or if she wasn't. So
well, and this is where some of the controversy comes in. So I'll skip a little ahead. Barnum was always involved in politics. He was always involved in sort of the networking of it, whether he was like a political figure himself or whether he was a politician. He was always kind of a political figure. He later in life, he did acknowledge, while he did fight for abolition, he was also a part of the temperance movement. No alcohol. While he did fight for abolition, he did own slaves. He acknowledged this, and he's quoted as saying, "I whipped my slaves. I ought to have been whipped 1,000 times for this myself. But then I was a Democrat, one of those nondescript Democrats who are Northern men with Southern principles." So I thought that was really interesting. He was very much in tune with this. I mean, this would have been a really tumultuous time, and so I'm interested. But yeah, it's interesting. He was a mayor of Connecticut. He improved water supply, gaslighting to streets, enforcing liquor and prostitution laws. He founded a hospital in 1878. Was the first president. It's funny. There's a whole section in Wikipedia called "Profitable Philanthropy," and that was what he publicly called it. He was a profitable philanthropist, and it's sort of interesting because that's sort of, you can't really be a philanthropist unless you are Bill Gates rich,
right.
But someone like Bill Gates has done a lot to improve the world conditions. So he's that's the best thing I can kind of say. I don't know what his net worth really was, but he was quite wealthy, and he did do a lot of philanthropic things. He said that the incentive to do good works will be twice as strong if there was a profit and drive. It was early America. It was weird. So it's just
that
funny.
seems like a really American sentiment.
It truly is. Like he is a quintessential 19th century American. Like we think of like Rockefeller and then later Ford, and this is like a different breed. I feel almost this is like right in that level, but this is really different because he didn't exploit, like it wasn't about cars or about railroads. He didn't like monopolize anything other than culture in a way, and people and gullibility. And like I said, he did do a lot in the political game. I don't know. I can't remember off the top of my head if Ford or Rockefeller were like politicians, if they actually ran for office like Barnum did. He was a member of the Connecticut House of Representatives, in office from 66 to 69. So he did truly hold office. So yeah, really interesting, but it's wild. I was looking. One way to kind of see some good opinions or some interesting opinions is just Google, is P.T. Barnum good or bad? And there was like one article that from The Wrap, written by someone who works with PETA, not happy. I mean, human exploitation, animal cruelty. Eventually the circus, was shut down. I think that was that was relatively recent, like the last 10 years, I want to say. But he like engineered too. I mean, Barnum came up with ways to like with tools to abuse the animals to get them to train them,
Right.
like shock them into submission, that kind of thing. But again, he did a whole bunch. So it's tough. And I don't know. It's wild. He was a prolific writer. He wrote about himself. He was so good at promoting himself and letting you know that he was doing good. And I mean, he did admit he had slaves, and he got in front of a lot of the issues. He was just an enigmatic person, and it's really hard to judge him other than just to certainly say he was an extreme like tour de force of this time, very influential. Like it's wild. It's absolutely wild. But one thing to kind of say, he did the circus itself didn't start until he was in his 60s. So like he did do the showman thing. He did have the American Museum. He did utilize the museum to show a lot of things, but the actual like circus with the animals didn't come until much later. So it's weird. The Showman movie, I think, is where it takes place. He would have been like 60, and Hugh Jackman is not 60, a lot younger. Looks it anyway. So it's wild. He was, he liked to, he found no, he was a great politician because he had no problem with lying and using hoaxes and exaggerating, and like they called him he was called the Prince of Humbugs. He totally just went out there with tons of stuff. And I don't know, I wonder how the political structure of that time was, if this was the norm, if politicians were already like, known for being horrible liars, or if he really helped revolutionize and pave the way for that. But yeah, it's wild. I was blown away by reading this. Britannica had a really fun write-up. Wikipedia's, of course, was great as well, but history.com had a bunch on it too. I think the Greatest Showman really like bumped up because that's where a lot of the discussion came from. Is he good? Is he bad? It's wild. I mean, he has left his imprint all over the United States. He helped popularize opera. He paid a woman from Nova Scotia $1,000 a day for several weeks to tour, and it totally helped make it boom. Like he personally like made that drive. I don't know how if he made money kind of off of it, but he pushed that to happen. He was directly responsible. I think it's because he loved it. So it's kind of interesting to see. So yeah, it's wild. It's absolutely wild. What, Cammy, this was your idea. What made you think about it?
It just popped into my head. I'm not
Really?
really
Was
sure.
that it?
Yeah, because when I was a kid, like I used to watch this show. It was like, you know, Robert Ripley had the Ripley's Believe It or Not. I
Yeah,
think his
yeah.
name Robert.
I can't remember. Yeah, I know Ripley. Yeah.
So they talked about a lot of stuff, and so I've always been kind of like fascinated with these oddities, these things that we know aren't real, or maybe even some things that are real, and we just, you know, we have stories about them that make them even like larger than what they are. And literally just talking to you, it popped into my head.
That's cool. That is certainly sums it up. I mean, it's interesting. There's so much about him that is true, and it just doesn't seem like it is. But he did.
No, I was just gonna say, like, I've never really liked him.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
I always thought he was like a bad person who happened to sometimes do good things.
Sure.
That's kind of how I've
that.
always seen him. But he's so fascinating. I mean, so like you can still not like somebody but be fascinated by
Yeah, absolutely. That's he's impactful. He's impactful, and I think, you know, if we do measure like what is good and what is bad, he certainly has done good and has certainly done bad. I mean, it is, he did things good and bad 100%, very impactful. It's interesting to see how, you know, if we can like weigh the scales Egyptian god style. I don't know how that's really like tough. I don't know how that's gonna go down. I'm sure they're still like trying to like work it out, and I'm sure he's gonna like BS his way through that. So but it's wild. Yeah. And it was wild reading this and having, like I said, The Greatest Showman. I just remember that being everywhere and being shoved down my face. And so like having that presentation of it, like, and then reading, and you're like, oh, okay.
Wait, so you did see the movie?
I did not, but it was
okay.
just shoved in your face. I remember the commercials and trailers. You know, this was 2017 is when it came out. Kinley was watching, we were watching like the animated films like Sing and gosh, what else? We were, you know, Frozen style stuff, Disney stuff, and those trailers would be part of it. And so it'd be like
just
the greatest,
so over the top,
yeah,
or
and
whatever.
I'm just like, okay, I got it. And I didn't even realize that was Barnum. That was supposed to be Barnum in that. I thought it was just going to be about like a fictional kind of character, but no, they're just, well, it's Barnum, you know, 40 years earlier, and he's not doing bad stuff and no politics, that kind of stuff. So yeah, Really interesting. So I hope if we didn't ruin the film for you, if you were hoping to see The Greatest Showman,
Well, we
completely
don't know if we ruined it or not because
void
we
of
haven't seen
opinions.
it.
Yeah, apparently it was well received in general. Very typical movie, musical movie style. So yeah, it's
One
wild.
thing that Bryant and I saw through research that I thought was really interesting is, and this has been in the news recently, Griswold versus Connecticut, the
Oh
birth
yes,
control
I'm glad you brought this
commission,
up. Yeah, yeah,
was basically started by Barnum. He's the one that challenged people's rights to. He was on the wrong side of this issue. He didn't want
right.
people to have birth control,
Yep.
but it was his influence
Yeah,
that then took this to
yeah. People had
trial.
to review law that he was a part of, like recently. Like he's affecting these things. So it's that was kind of wild to realize and to read about. Yeah, he was. I was really like surprised to see that he was part of the temperance movement. Yet he was such a like. I don't know. I feel like I'm just like, why didn't you sell alcohol? I don't. I
Right.
just like that's if he was
You would
born
think.
like if he was born like 30 years later, he would have
Well,
been
he
like
had all the cocaine
bootlegging.
he wanted, so he
I
didn't
know.
need to sell alcohol.
I just felt like he would have been like the biggest bootlegger if it had been like 30 plus years later. So
Right,
really
yeah.
wild. Really just
It was definitely a missed
he's insane.
opportunity.
Well, that's excellent. Cammy, thanks so much for thinking of this topic and bringing your story. Please look up some of this stuff too. You've got to look up like the Fiji Mermaid diagrams, pictures, the things that people made. It's really worth looking at. And of course, for the show, if you have any suggestions on what we should talk about, let us know. Mythstorie, that's a Mythstorie, one word with an IE at the end, at Gmail is a great way to get in touch with us. We've got our Facebook group. If you think we needed to add something here, let us know. You can comment or just directly let us know, and I can always add some stuff to the show notes. I think that's it, Cammy. You got anything else?
No, that's it.
All right, everyone. Well, we're 3 in since we came back, and we're gonna keep going. I hope so. We will see you next time.
Oh.